So what are these 6 trends? Well, I've been talking about them for a long time. Unfortunately, they don't change, but we tend to forget them, kind of like, you know, our dependence on oil. We tend to forget occasionally. Our population is growing very slowly. It's growing older. It's growing unevenly. It's spreading out. Our economic base is changing. And our government, as well as all of our institutions, are under enormous pressure. We'll take them one at a time. First off, our population is growing slowly. The bar in red shows Maine's growth in population from 1990 to 2008. And you see Maine compared to the other New England states, and you'll see we've been among the slowest growing in our region. Then look at New England, shown in red here, with all the other regions in the U.S. And New England is the slowest growing region in the nation. There are other areas growing several times more rapidly than Maine. So what's been happening? There's a couple of reasons that Maine is growing more slowly in its population. What this shows over the past decade, the annual growth in population, with the blue part of the bar being the natural increase and the red being in net migration. We have been seeing some net migration, as you can see. It wasn't until 2009 that we saw some net out-migration of people. But probably the bigger long-term story is that there are fewer people of childbearing years, so we aren't having as many babies. In fact, we're having fewer babies now than we've ever had since we started recording in the late 1800s. And our population is aging, as we'll get into. So that is causing us to slow down in our population growth. Well, why is that an issue? A lot of people would suggest that it's okay to have slow population growth. Well, there's a couple of things that come with that. First of all, when we're growing slow, that means that we can't just grow out of our problems. A rapidly growing economy will allow poor business practices and poor economic fundamentals to be overlooked for a while because you can continue to grow because of all the new energy coming into the region. However, when a population's growing very slowly, you can't cover up those kind of flaws that are at your base. About a year ago, Thomas Friedman had an article in the New York Times where he quoted Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett was saying that only when the tide goes out do you see who's not wearing a bathing suit. His point was that in times of financial crisis, you expose weak companies and weak countries. And for us, in times of a recession, you expose the underlying strength of your economy for the long haul. The other big thing that slow population growth points to is the need for education. Never, never, never has it been more important than it is right now. You can see a very clear correlation in our educational attainment and the income of the various states in the U.S. And if we want to move Maine to greater prosperity, we have to make some decisions that will help move us along the educational continuum. In fact, you'll see with every single small increment of education, unemployment declines, there are many more opportunities, and incomes rise for people. So our probably most important strategy as a state is to figure out how we move each and every Maine person to their greatest potential along this educational continuum. The second big trend, we're growing older, and I always like to say, except for, of course, the people in this room. You see that crest of the wave, which is the baby boom population. These are the number of babies born every year since the early 1900s to present. And that group of us born between 1946 and 1964 is the baby boom generation. And I like to refer to it as the wave, which is about to crash on the shores of retirement. In fact, about a year ago, the first baby boomers entered those golden years. And as an economy, we need to prepare for this because we cannot allow this huge cohort to just exit the workforce at the age of 65. What's a little more dramatic is when you skip over the period of time This shows the population growth from 2010 to 2030 by age cohort, and it gives you some indication to the degree of change we are about to face. I'll run you quickly across the bars. From 0 to 19-year-olds, that population base will shrink by 6% over this period. That's your K through 12 group. The 20 to 29-year-olds will fall 28%. That's your college level and the beginnings of your entry-level workers. 30 to 44 will stay stable. 45 to 64 will be reduced by 10%. On the other end of the spectrum, 65 to 74 will grow 73%. 75 to 84, up 90%. 85 and above will grow 60% over this period. The question we have to ask is, are we ready for this? Do we have the appropriate healthcare systems in place? Do we have the appropriate transportation systems in place? Can we serve people in terms of housing? Those choices, those decisions need to be made now. The other thing I would point out is as we grow older, our budget priorities will shift. And is our state budget going to reflect that priority shift? Finally, by the time you get to the year 2030, which is shown in the red bars, this is the percentage of the population base. So just focus on the bars to the far right. In the year 2010, about 16% of our population is over the age of 65. By 2030, which is not that far away, fully 27% of our population will be over the age of 65. So 1 out of every 4 Mainers. The third trend, we're growing very unevenly. That's probably not a surprise. The vast majority of the population growth in Maine has been on the southern coastal regions. For those of you who can't see it, I lay out all the counties, starting with York, all the way up the coastline to Hancock, because those economies tend to be very similar. The 3 bars in the middle are the 3 central inland counties along the I-95 corridor, Androscoggin, Kennebec, and Penobscot. And the other set are the western mountain counties, Aroostook and Washington County. Very clear differences, very uneven growth, and your view of what's happening in Maine and what needs to be done for Maine will vary greatly depending on where you reside and which part of the population spectrum you're on. All of the growth has been in the southern Maine region, very tepid growth in central inland, and actually population losses in those rim counties. The fourth, we're spreading out. So we're already one of the most rural states in the nation. And in my lifetime, the percentage of the population that's been living in the service center communities has been reduced from 63% down to about 48%. We've been spreading out into suburban and rural areas. And this is the effect called sprawl. I want to demonstrate what this means because many of us don't think, sprawl, who cares, so we're moving out into the small towns. But slowly and silently, it has been taking an enormous toll on us. Environmentally, it's been taking a toll as we commute longer distances. Civically, it takes a toll because we're on the road instead of working and living and doing business in our home communities. But fiscally, it's taking a huge toll. This gives you an idea from 1970 to 2002, the population changes in our school enrollment in various towns. The towns on the far left are Lewiston and Auburn, the big service center communities. Over that period of time, school enrollment went down by between 30 and 35%. In that very same period of time, let's look at the big metropolis of Sabattis, Wales, Turner, Poland, Minot, Greene, Durham, and New Gloucester all grew in school enrollment from 50 to 100% increases over that time. To meet that need of this sprawling population growth, we built new redundant infrastructure. So the service center communities were dealing with the costs, their fixed costs of their schools, and serving a declining population base, and the outlying communities had to build new schools to keep up with population growth. That's where it gets to become a financial issue.